What's going on YouTube? This is Ribo back at the Fake Bench, and today I have a very exciting fixed blade cut or carry review. This is the Chris Reeve Knives Pacific. So this is the first fixed blade that I have reviewed in quite a while, if ever, and definitely the first Chris Reeve fixed blade that I've ever owned. I recently kind of got interested in checking out a couple fixed blades, and so maybe this won't be the last fixed review. But since I've become a pretty big Chris Reeve fan over the past year or two, I thought, what better way to dive into the world of fixed blades than with a CRK? So I saw this one pop up. This was secondhand, kind of used knife, and thought it was a pretty good price, so I jumped on it, and I have been testing it out a bit. I took this camping and to use at a couple backyard bonfires with some friends. You can see actually, this is a coated blade. You can actually see that I have used this knife quite a bit, and so this is definitely a user review. So have some thoughts and let's get into it. So quick kind of high-level overview of the knife. S35VN. You have these removable micarta handles, and you have this this coating right here, which I forget exactly what type of coating they use, but seems to have held up pretty well to what I've put it through so far. One of the issues I've had with coated blades before is you tend to get the marks on the blade here, and they're kind of hard to get off. So, I don't know if I'll be able to get those marks off or not, but this was purchased to be a user, so no big deal. With the knife, you also get, and it's too big for the camera here, but you get this very large CRK sheath. I think there's a couple different color variations that you can get. This is a camo version. It's pretty big. If I'll slip this in here real quick. You can get a sense. So you carry it through here, which is, I think that the sheath is a nice balance, right? Because you don't want the belt too low or else this can get real top heavy. But this does hang pretty deep, maybe a little bit too deep for me. And then obviously you can snap that closed. But the knife really ends somewhere around here, and then you've got a lot of material here. So while it's a good sheath, and I do like kind of the they have I don't know what they use for it, but they have some type of hard material in here. I like this sheath. I think it's very functional. It's pretty inefficient for me. It's way too big for what I've tried to use it for, so I didn't find it super practical. But on to the knife. Let's do our cutter carry, and let's get into what I like and dislike. I guess really quick, I keep kind of making caveats. Really quick, let me just throw up a size comparison. I just happen to have the Sebenza Large 21 in my pocket, so just so you get an idea of how large this knife is. This is not a small fixed blade. All right, excuse me, bump the camera. With that out of the way, let me finally get into the things that I like and dislike about the CRK Pacific. First of all, things that I like. So the micarta handles, you can see these are a little bit wet. I didn't want to wait. I got the handle wet and didn't want to wait for it to dry out before I filmed the video. But I think that the handles are, number one, really, really nice looking. I think they fit the style of the knife really, really well. Number two, the texturing is fantastic. I mean, this is the perfect example of grippy without too grippy. It's not too aggressive, but it's just aggressive enough. It functions very, very well. You get a rock solid grip on the knife without it being uncomfortable. The contouring, if you kind of look at this from the side, I think is done very, very well. Kind of, you can see some of the details through here. You have obviously some contouring that kind of matches the jimping down there. Overall, the handles are fantastic. I think it's very ergonomic in general. I mean, this is where your hand falls. This feels really great. This also feels pretty good, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But overall, the handles and the ergos are really, really good on the Pacific, at least in kind of a casual grip. So I do really, really like that. Other things that I like about the knife, overall, I think the design is very, very nice. Now, it is a bit more tactical looking than maybe I was after, but for what it is, I think it's a really, really cool looking knife. And then I love, I talked about kind of the handle here from a visual perspective, but also functional. The knife too, the blade I think is really, really nice looking, but more important than that, it's very functional. So you have this really big swedge up here, which is something that I have really come to love on the Insingo bladed Sabenzas. What that gives you is that gives you a really, really thin tip up here to pierce with. And overall, just a nice looking design. You can see the detail of those angles right there is just really, really nice, but it's very, very functional. So you can pierce really, really well, but you're not really losing much strength because that is a chunk of S35 VN. That is pretty substantial, but because of that swedge, you have a very, very usable tip, which is really, really nice. So I like it from a visual standpoint, but I also think it's very, very functional. I actually really like the serrated blade too. So the Pacific comes in a serrated version and a non-serrated. You only get these maybe 2 inches of serrations down here, but it's a very interesting serration pattern. I think it is performed very well. I've used it to cut some rope and things like that. It looks like it would be fairly easy to sharpen as well. So there's not a ton of complexity there, although you do have coated portion of the blade here that's going to have to be sharpened as the knife ages. So just I guess keep that in mind. And let's see what else. Well, with the CRKs in general, the details are just very nice. I mean, the stamping on the blade is very nice with the designer's name there. Idaho made, obviously. I think the balance on this knife is pretty good. It is a very, very heavy knife, but I think the balance overall is pretty good. Trying to think of other things. Obviously, I like the ability to disassemble the handle, in case you want to put something else on or just clean it out. That's a really cool option. I like the lanyard hole over here. It does come with a lanyard. I took mine off. The lanyard on mine was comically large. I think that's normal for the knife, but I was not really a fan, so I removed that. In terms of cutting performance, it's excellent. I mean, this knife is so big that for my practical purposes, I was almost using it like an axe. I was, I was trying to cut some kindling for firewood. Not really, I baton maybe a little bit here. It's not really a batoning knife, but I was just kind of doing some chop cuts to get some dry curls off of an oak log. And it was doing really, really well. I mean, the knife is so heavy that you can pretty much use it like an axe for some of those applications, and I thought it worked very, very well. I do have a couple things to say about performance later, but overall, as a knife, it performs very well, and you wouldn't really expect anything less from CRK. Finally, things that I like about the knife. This sounds ridiculous because I think this knife retails for maybe $325, but I actually think it's a pretty good value. And I think you can tell that by the fact that these are somewhat hard to come by. A lot of the Chris Reeve knives, fixed blades, can be hard to come by. But I think that at $325, when you compare that to something like this, which retails for $550, granted, it's the micarta version, so it's going to be a little bit more. But even a plain Jane version is going to be more expensive, which makes sense. It's more complexity and whatnot. But for the amount of steel that you're getting, for the handle material, for the type of steel, for the brand name, for the finish details, the fact that you get a sheath with it, et cetera, I don't think that's terrible. Now, you have to kind of already be in an expensive knife camp to say that a $325 fixed blade is not terrible. And I realize that sounds ridiculous, and in a lot of ways that is really ridiculous. But for the brand, relatively, I don't think it's that bad. So value knife, no, but relative to what it is, the brand and the other knives, I don't think it's terrible. Okay, so let's get into things that I don't like about the knife. So I think the primary thing that I don't like about the knife, apart from some kind of personal issues, is the ergonomics are great when you are in kind of a casual grip like this, or when you're doing something like this. However, when you go from this grip up to this grip, this becomes an issue. And what I have found is that with hard use, this knife becomes incredibly uncomfortable for me. So hard use being having to really clamp down for push cuts and having to do any type of batoning or one of the things that I was doing with this, my son and I were out at a bonfire and we didn't have sticks for his marshmallows, so I was carving up some marshmallow sticks. And to do that, what I needed to do was to take a limb and kind of, rough cut it down to a point, and then I would kind of fine tune the point. And rough cutting it down to a point involved cutting through a couple shallow knots and bark and things like that. And so I used this knife for that, just the edge up here past the serration. And I realized that it's not really the perfect blade for that type of use. But what I found was that when I had to do real aggressive push cuts, I had to really clamp down, and I'd either have to go to a grip like this, where this point kind of got into my finger, or I would hold something like this, which isn't super comfortable, or this. And I just found that the more unless I was really doing a full wraparound cut like this, the knife was not super comfortable to hold. It just seemed like there were a couple pressure points, particularly up here and down here, that really started to bother me. And it was really disappointing, to be honest, because I was hoping that this knife would be kind of a camping outdoor knife for me. But I was somewhat disappointed in kind of the hard use grip that I was using, and maybe that's my fault. But I tried it a couple ways, and I never really could find anything that was super comfortable. Besides that, I think just in general, the knife is probably a little bit more than I was looking for. And that's very subjective. That's really what you're using it for. And for me, I'm looking for kind of a light outdoor knife, something that is comfortable to carry on the waist and, that kind of thing. This is just a little bit overbuilt for what I'm really looking for. It's a bit too heavy. The serrations are nice. I can kind of do with or without those. It's just a little bit too long, too heavy for what I'm looking for. And it's a little bit too much contouring. Like I've talked before about knife handles in general, and I tend to prefer stuff like this where you don't have too much of that finger grip and stuff built in. It can work really well. There's some knives like the Manix 2 that I love that have grips like that. This one just did not really work for my hands. So cut or carry for me, this is going to be a cut. I like the knife a lot on paper. I like the knife a lot sitting on my desk. I just didn't really like the knife using it, and that's kind of an important thing in a knife for me. So this will not be, hopefully, my last CRK fixed. I would love to have a Nyala, but those are really hard to come by. But this was really fun. I really enjoyed checking this out. I think it's a beautiful knife, and I think with the right application, this could be an excellent knife for someone. Hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you next time.